We'll move to questions without notice, and I give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, just on indulgence, offer our best wishes to the Attorney-General. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, in committing to implement the Uluru Statement from Heart in full, the Prime Minister has previously claimed, and I quote, "There can be no real progress on closing the gap, and there can be no reconciliation without treaty and truth-telling." Will the Prime Minister be honest and upfront with Australians and inform the House whether or not he remains committed to a treaty and truth-telling process?
The call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, I've got a question about Uluru's statement from the heart from the Leader of the Opposition. And what I have said very clearly is that I will give respect to Indigenous Australians who have asked for a week to consider their position. I think that is pretty reasonable. That we then have a process of consultation. One of the things that I've been committed to is to the agency of First Australians, not making them just disappear from the process. And that's why I found some of the rhetoric that was used during the referendum so concerning. The idea that the Uluru Statement from the Heart was created by the Labor Party or by any individual there wipes out from history the work that Indigenous Australians did themselves. They were asked by Prime Minister Abbott to work on the form of recognition that they wanted, and that is what they did in 2017. And my position is clear about that. It stands in stark contrast with the Leader of the Opposition. Now, it's not clear to me what his position is. It changes all the time. It changed between yesterday and today. In fact, it changed between sunrise and today. More flip-flop than a thong factory, this bloke. This morning he said this, after saying yesterday the second referendum was off. This morning he said this. Nat, I know there's a lot of interpretation of this, but the Liberal Party has gone to elections, every election since John Howard was leader, with the same policy. They just never did it. And I think it is a respectful thing to do. It remains our policy. That's what he had to say. And then he went on to say,
Member for Hume,
you can only do it when you've got support from Indigenous leaders. So he just asked a question saying ignore Indigenous leaders, don't speak to them about what you're going to do.
Order. Prime Minister will pause. The Leader, the Minister for Indigenous, the Minister will cease ejecting, and so will the member for Barker, so I can hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, it's on relevance. We asked the Prime Minister just for one straight, honest answer.
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure will cease interjecting immediately. The Prime Minister will continue.
More anger from the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker. More anger. But he went on, he didn't just say it once, he said, and that remains our policy. He went on to say, there's nothing new or tricky or changed here. And then he changed it when he went on the Today Show. Can't keep a straight line between Channel 7 and Channel 9. You flick the dial and you get a different answer. On one you get two referendums. On the other one you get just one.
Time has concluded. Member for Bowman will cease interjecting. The member for Deakin will not continue with that interjection, and I will hear from the member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Last night, National Cabinet met to agree to a new National Skills Agreement. How will this agreement be good for Australians, good for the economy and good for our future?
Order. The member will resume her seat. The Manager of Opposition Business is continually interjecting. I think he knows my policy about interjections during questions. The member will restate her question again.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Last night, National Cabinet met to agree to a new National Skills Agreement. How will this agreement be good for Australians, good for the economy and good for our future?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Gilmore for her question. And last night, National Cabinet reached a landmark National Skills Agreement. And I pay tribute to the Minister for working with state ministers for skills over the last year in order to deliver this, which arose out of the Jobs and Skills Summit that we held here last year. This is a commitment with $12.5 billion over 5 years to transform and expand access to skills and training. It includes $214 million to close the gap in skills between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. The agreement delivers the skills people need to find a good job and the workforce that Australia needs to build a better future. And I thank the Premiers and Chief Ministers who I've met with over the last fortnight in order to land this landmark deal. And indeed, it's the first National Skills Agreement since 2012. It's like history disappeared and just stopped during 2013 and 2022. These investments will deliver skills in priority areas right across the country, as well as meet local needs. We'll work together with the states to deliver TAFE centres of excellence because we know we need more collaboration between the universities and the vet sector. We will invest in skills because it's good for Australians. It's good for the individuals. So students I met this morning working on EV maintenance and on electric vehicles who will have jobs, good, secure jobs into the future. And it was fantastic to meet those Australians, either young Australians or in one case someone reskilling in order to secure a good job for the future. Now, investing in skills is a national priority for us. The National Skills Agreement builds on the work we've done over the last 18 months, delivering, first of all, we promised 180,000 fee-free TAFE places and we've delivered 215,000 of them. We will deliver another 300,000 fee-free TAFE places from January next year. We've established Jobs and Skills Australia. We're improving foundation skills delivery because we know 1 in 5 adults have alarming gaps in literacy, numeracy and digital literacy. We're lifting apprenticeship completion rates. Our investments mean more workers in the care sector, in aged care and childcare, more workers in clean energy, more workers in construction and more workers in manufacturing. Good for individuals and good for our economy.
Give a call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister and concerns the reaction from Indigenous leaders to the Prime Minister's dismal response to his referendum failure. Alira Davis, an Uluru Dialogue member, said, and I quote, "The PM is moving on tonight. He just wants to go to Washington and prepare for re-election, and we are just a blip." Sally Scales, a member of the First Nations Referendum Working Group, said, and I quote,
Order.
"The PM was insulting and pathetic. How dare he a cop-out?"
Order.
Does the Prime Minister remain committed?
Yeah, resume. That's okay. Just resume. Yeah, resume your seat. It's fine. There is far too much noise. There was no question there, but because I couldn't hear what the Deputy Leader was saying, because of the interjections from the member for McNamara, the member for Cooper, I'm going to ask the Deputy Leader to state a question again, to be heard in silence, and make sure she's within the time limit.
My question is to the Prime Minister and concerns the reaction from Indigenous leaders to the Prime Minister's dismal response to his referendum failure. Alira Davis, an Uluru Dialogue member, said, and I quote, "The PM is moving on tonight. He just wants to go to Washington and prepare for re-election, and we are just a blip." Sally Scales, a member of the First Nations Referendum Working Group, said, "The PM was insulting and pathetic. How dare he? A cop-out." Does the Prime Minister remain committed to treaty and truth-telling.
Order. The Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Citizenship and the Minister for Home Affairs. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. It is a quite extraordinary question, even for the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. But let me understand what the Deputy Leader of the Opposition is asking for here. She's suggesting, having quoted, people who put their heart and soul into the development of the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will cease objecting.
From 2012 at least, but going back from when John Howard promised in 2007 to hold a referendum within 18 months of his election based upon Indigenous recognition. The Leader of the Opposition has a number of occasions said that it has been the policy of the Liberal Party since 2007 to have a referendum. If only they had been in a position to do so. They won in 2013, they won in 2016, they won in 2019 and nothing happened. What I did was fulfil the commitment that I gave to Indigenous people, but most importantly that I gave to the Australian people at the election in which we were elected in May 2022. Indigenous Australians asked for Australians to vote on the Indigenous recognition in our Constitution through a voice. They invited, in the words of the Uluru Statement, us to walk with them. They said in 1967 we were counted. In 2017 we want to be heard, was what they said. Now, we fulfilled that commitment, but the Deputy Leader of the Opposition would have you believe, through asking that question, that the people who have spent a lifetime campaigning for constitutional recognition of First Australians, who are understandably disappointed by the result.
The member for Hume.
What I have said is that
Members on my left.
what I have said is I respect the decision that was made by the Australian people. On that basis, some people who've campaigned very strongly for it are not happy with that response. But I made it very clear before the election that I would respect the outcome, and I've made it after as well. I will show respect to those people. The Deputy Leader shows none.
Has concluded. Call to the member for Aston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How will the landmark 5-year National Skills Agreement give Australians the skills they need for the careers and opportunities of the future after a wasted decade in skills and training?
Give the call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Thanks, Speaker. Well, can I thank the member for Aston for her question and her strong advocacy for the vet sector. This is the first National Skills Agreement we've had in this country for more than a decade, and it's going to provide the opportunities to invest in the skills sector in a way that hasn't happened for too long. Upon election, we realised we had the largest skills crisis in this country we'd seen for 5 decades. It didn't matter what area of the economy, labour market you looked at, you saw there were shortages. Now, this approach to negotiate effectively, unlike those opposite, with state and territory governments, started at the Jobs and Skills Summit. That tone meant that we then could, I believe, collaborate in good faith amongst all 9 governments to deliver this agreement. And it's really important that we do deliver this agreement, Speaker, as the shortages are as deep as they are wide in our economy. Whether it's traditional trades or the care economy, we need to do more. Now, I think for too long we've seen the Commonwealth act more like a funding body rather than a strategic partner in the investment of skills in the vet sector. And for that reason, you need an agreement to bring about the reforms to make sure the vet sector, along with the other tertiary sector that my friend the Minister for Education is working on, is fit for purpose. And without these reforms through this agreement, that would not happen. And can I say, first and foremost, we need to have a vet sector which has TAFE at its heart, a public provider working with industry, working with the universities to provide the skills that are necessary. We also want to see centres of excellence that will bring together the two tertiary sectors, the collaboration of universities and the vet sector, because it's increasingly more the case that you need jobs for the future that have technical skills and conceptual knowledge. The idea you delineate these two areas of expertise, skills and knowledge, is a misnomer and outdated. And through these centres of excellence, we will see a greater collaboration between universities and TAFEs and other vet providers, and I look forward to that. We also need to see different courses delivered, higher apprenticeships, because we do understand that, for example, if you look at the changing nature of the energy sector, the transformation that's happening there, we need to see people that are acquiring a different set of skills along with the traditional skills and knowledge. That is what is needed, and that's what we want to deliver under this agreement. Also, of course, providing more opportunities for women in male-dominated areas, providing opportunities and opening up access to First Nations people, people with disabilities, investment in foundation skills. It is a frightening statistic to think that 1 in 5 adults in this country have foundational skills problems, and this will be a priority of this area too, to provide opportunities for them. We've got a lot to do, but this is a very good day for the vet sector.
Before I call the member for Warringah, I'm pleased to inform the House the present in the gallery today are this year's recipients of the Prime Minister's Prizes for Science. The prize acknowledges scientists, innovators and educators who are doing excellent work in the field of science. Congratulations to all the winners and welcome to Question Time. I'm also very pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today are the winners of the My First Speech competition. Welcome to Question Time, Chelsea Adams, Amy Fortchett and Alan Stevens. These bright young students are from years 12, 11, 10 in the electorates of Boothby, Grayndler and Lindsay, and have all submitted speeches of the highest quality to this year's competitions. Congratulations and well done. And I give the call to the honourable member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, consumers are protected from commercial conduct and advertising that is misleading and deceptive. This includes promotions or ads that contain false and inaccurate information and statements that fail to disclose important information. But nothing protects voters from misleading and deceptive political advertising. Will you support my bill or introduce legislation without delay to provide voter protections in political advertising consistent with existing consumer protections?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Warringah for her question, and I certainly understand her perspective, because it is a concern with the changing media environment as well, that people can be the subject to misinformation, which in some cases is just about politics, but in some cases can be dangerous. And
Order. Members on my left.
Well, perhaps I wasn't going to give a specific example, but I will.
Order.
I will. During the recent campaign, there was a photograph with the Star of David across 8 Australians' faces: Mark Liebler, Thomas Mayo, Anthony Pratt, Justice Stephen Rothman, Julian Leeser, Josh Burns, Kim Rubenstein and Mark Dreyfus. This is what it said: all of the major creators, financiers and supporters of the Voice to Parliament are Jewish. Ask yourself why 0.38% of Australia's population is using 3% as a battering ram against the rest of the country every single time, full stop. Before that, in the explanation, before the ad, the account said this: just a totally organic coincidence, spelt COHENCIDENCE, for the betterment of Australia, and totally not the latest chapter in the thousands-year-old hate and attempted destruction of white people. Mr. Speaker,
Order. Members on my left.
Mr. Speaker, the question that has been asked by the member for Warringah goes to a serious question of what, and everyone in this parliament would find that totally abhorrent. Which is why are you interjecting at this point in time?
The member for Petrie.
The member for... I'm not going to give a free ad to those people. I wasn't going to go through. There's a number of them along those lines. Now, when it comes to the challenge which we have of dealing with this, it's complex. You don't want to interfere with any freedom of expression, but you also want to make sure that elections can be held and democratic processes can be held in an appropriate way. Now, the minister is undertaking appropriate processes to deal with that, and I look forward to working with the member for Warringah.
Give the call to the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question is to the Treasurer. Why are better skills and better pay such important parts of the Albanese Labor government's plans to help Australians with cost of living pressures? And why is urgent action needed?
Great.
Give a call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the outstanding member for Newcastle for her question. The member for Newcastle understands that what unites the Employment White Paper 3 weeks ago, the passage of the Housing Australia Future Fund and last night's skills agreement is we have been working away and working for Australia to help with the cost of living pressures that we know so many people are facing. And as the Prime Minister has said a moment ago, we are investing in the skills people need to find a good job and the workforce that Australia needs to build a better future. We are investing in skills because if you're better trained, you are better paid, Mr. Speaker. The White Paper we released is focused on full employment, job security and wages, productivity, skills needs and barriers to employment as well. And the Reserve Bank just today, Mr. Speaker, has backed our approach to sustained and inclusive full employment.
The Treasurer will pause. The member for Hume is continuing to interject. He's now warned. If he interjects one more time, he will leave the chamber. The Treasurer will be heard in silence.
It's the closest he gets to a question, Mr. Speaker. The Reserve Bank has said that our approach to full employment is consistent with theirs. They said, and I quote, "The White Paper emphasised the importance of monitoring a broader set of indicators beyond the unemployment rate, which is also consistent with the bank's existing approach." Mr. Speaker. Now, unemployment has a 3 in front of it, and more than 500,000 jobs have been created under this Prime Minister, which is a record for a new government. But in order to create even more opportunities for more people, we need to skill people up. And that's why I pay tribute to the work of this Skills Minister and this Prime Minister and the National Cabinet for coming to that landmark skills agreement announced today. We know, as I said, Mr. Speaker, that better training and better pay go hand in hand. And both of these things are central to our economic plan and central to the 10 ways that we are rolling out $23 billion to help ease cost of living pressures while still delivering the first surplus in 15 years. We've got electricity bill relief, cheaper childcare, increased rent assistance, more Medicare bulk billing, cheaper medicines, boosting income support payments, building more affordable homes, extending paid parental leave, fee-free TAFE, and we're getting wages moving again after a decade of deliberate wage stagnation. Mr. Speaker, those opposite oppose our plan because they want lower wages and higher prices. They're long on nasty negativity, but they're short of anything positive to say about the future. Australians have already paid too hefty a price for their failures on the economy, Mr. Speaker. When Australians are doing it tough, we are providing cost of living help. We are skilling Australians up for great jobs. We are getting wages moving again. We are getting the budget in much better nick, and in the process, Mr Speaker, we are cleaning up the mess that those opposite left behind.
Order. The members for Riverina and Gippsland are continuing to interject and are now both warned. Give the call to the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. While the Prime Minister has been distracted with his divisive $450 million referendum, hundreds of life-saving road projects have stalled at a time when the road toll is rising alarmingly. Why has the Prime Minister 90-day review of infrastructure projects blown out to 170 days and counting?
Order. Prime Minister. Order. Members on my left. The Prime Minister has the call. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. It's far from helpful. The opposite. Can I call the Prime Minister, and I'd like him to be heard in silence, just as the member for Dawson was heard in silence.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, the member for Dawson asked about the cost of the referendum, but in fact half of the cost of the referendum was in the forward estimates provisioned by the former government. By the former government. It was there in the Liberal Party's budget handed down by Josh Frydenberg. But they just forgot to do it, Mr Speaker. Election after election, they went to elections and said they would hold a referendum. They provided funding to hold a referendum.
Order. Members on my right. Members on my right. The member for Fremantle will cease interjecting. I'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
On relevance, Mr Speaker, if the Prime Minister's point is that the cost...
Resume your seat. The order. The Leader of the Opposition has taken his one point of order on relevance. The Prime Minister is talking about the funding of the referendum, and I'll make sure he is relevant to the remainder of the question.
2007, they went to an election promising a referendum. It's been the Liberal Party's policy ever since. 2010, 2013 they were elected, 2016 they were elected, 2019 they were elected. They went to the 2022 election having made provisions in the forward estimates for a referendum, but then of course they decided no, to oppose it, and then they asked questions about the cost. The Leader of the Opposition, in his interjection across the chamber, spoke with the sort of arrogance that we're coming to see, said you'll find out how much it will cost when you're in opposition to those here. That's what he said. When he said at the dispatch box as well, 100%, well, they want a 100% increase in cost because they want to hold another one. They want to hold another one, and he just confirmed that across the chamber. Mr Speaker,
order. Members on my left.
The member for Dawson, asked about infrastructure because there again they didn't make provision to actually deliver what was needed to fund projects. A $33 billion blowout in their infrastructure. Unlike the former Labor government that I must say promised and funded properly the Mackay Ring Road, for example. The Bruce Highway upgrades to the south, the Peak Downs Highway to the west. We funded those things properly. We funded them, we built them, we made a difference and got it done. But those opposite, of course, were big on promises, but they didn't ever worry about providing the funding to build what they were promising. They just added it on.
The member for Dawson.
Added it on and never did it. I've just named 3 in his electorate that we delivered. The fact is that we have had to clean up the mess, like in so many areas, that the incompetent former government left.
Order. Members on my left, the member for Dawson was continually interjecting after he'd asked the question. Will cease interjecting. The member for Hasluck has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. What have recent reports found about the visa system over the last decade, and what is the Albanese Labor government doing to address these findings and clean up the mess?
The call to the Minister for Home Affairs and the Minister for Cyber Security.
Thank you, Speaker, and could I thank the member for Hasluck for her question and for her brilliant advocacy of her local community. Speaker, yesterday I updated the House on the rapid review into the exploitation of Australia's visa system, which was led by former Victorian Police Commissioner Christine Nixon. And what Ms Nixon uncovered about our immigration system was absolutely shocking. She found that systemic, abhorrent networks of sexual exploitation, human trafficking and other organised crime were being facilitated by breakdowns in our migration system. In fact, Ms Nixon's report says that things got so bad that organised crime gangs around the world were actually looking to Australia to come here and set up a practice because our immigration system made it easy for those gangs to abuse innocent people and traffic people into our country. And that is why the actions of the Australian government in response to this have been so broad and sweeping and significant. We have reorganised part of the entire Department of Home Affairs to make sure that we are better managing this system. We've dedicated $50 million to establish this new division, which will bring together different parts of government that can help us properly run the migration system. We've set up a permanent strike force that will rove around different parts of the immigration system and address the integrity problems we see. We've also established Operation Inglenook, something which brings together Australian Border Force and other parts of government, which is fighting abuses in the system. And as part of our response to the Nixon review, we have embedded that in the department and made it permanent. As a result of all these efforts, quite significant actions have been able to be taken in the specifics of what Ms Nixon found. There have been deportations as a result of her work. We've turned a number of people around at the border. Migration agents have been deregistered and there have been other associated activities. And I wanted to quickly provide the House with a case study which I think really well establishes how these problems in our migration system have kind of worked together to establish this environment that Christine Nixon talked about. We had an individual who arrived in Australia on a student visa in 2014, and he was found later not to have studied at all in Australia. Instead, he set up a sprawling underground sex worker racket which abused vulnerable people. What's outrageous is that this person actually committed similar crimes in the UK. The Australian government found out about that and did not do anything about it. Now, one of the things that I find about this very upsetting, and I think Australians are angry about what they see here. They understand that there are risks involved in running a system like this. What they do not like, Speaker, is hypocrisy. And what we saw was the opposition leader parade around the country saying that he was a tough guy on borders while organised criminals were coming in under his nose and exploiting people and abusing them. He is a fraud, he is a hypocrite, and he should apologise to Australians for the mess that he created on our borders.
Give the call. Order. The Minister for Early Childhood will cease to eject. Member for Hume has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Prime Minister's inability to give the price of petrol recently. Government excise makes up a significant part of the petrol price Australians pay at the browser. Prime Minister, what is the fuel excise rate?
The member for Bendigo will cease interjecting or be warned. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the Shadow Treasurer for his question. Now, the Shadow Treasurer, who is incapable of asking a question of the Treasurer, incapable of asking a question of the Treasurer.
Order. The member for Wannon. Order. When members on my left cease interjecting, I'll hear from the member for Hume, and he'll need to state a point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker.
Right,
if the Prime Minister isn't across the
resume your seat. Well, 15 seconds. will be order. Members on my left, 15 seconds is a new record for relevance being taken, but we'll monitor that. Order. It's far too much noise. The member for Sturt. When the House comes to order, give the call to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has the call.
The fact is that under those opposite, of course, this is typical of what those opposite do. They refuse to take responsibility, for any of their actions. And what we saw with their budget, was in 2022, they handed down a budget with a whole bunch of goodies, that all ran out. And that is why they left a $78 billion deficit, one that we have turned around into a $22 billion surplus. Now, if those opposite,
members on my left, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting.
Those opposite brought forward in that budget in March a freeze to the fuel excise. They brought that forward, but they also put in an end date for it. Now, it's now 48 cents, but what they did was bring forward—
Order. The Leader of the Opposition.
What they did was bring forward—
Members on my left.
—changes which all ran out as soon as people had cast their vote. But they left a $78 billion black hole, as well as, of course, contributing to $1 trillion of debt.
The member for Casey will leave the chamber under 94A. There is far too much noise.
They, of course,
are at all-time high.
The largest ever inflation of 2.1% in decades that we saw, was on their watch in the March quarter. And what we have done is turn that around with a policy aimed at tackling inflation whilst dealing with cost of living pressures, while at the same time dealing with supply chain issues, which is what our National Skills Agreement is about. Those opposite who have nothing to offer, a shadow treasurer who has taken a vow of silence when it comes to talking with the Treasurer. He may as well have a Trappist monk in charge.
Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is now warned, alongside the member for Barker. The member for Pearce has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring our Navy has an appropriate surface fleet in light of the previous management of defence and the strategic circumstances Australia faces?
The call to the Minister for Defence and the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank the member for her question? On the 29th of September, the government received the independent analysis of Navy's surface combatant fleet, and this was a short, sharp piece of work which was done in response to the Defence Strategic Review back in April by Willie Hillardes, Rosemary Huxtable and Stuart Mayer. And I want to take this opportunity to thank each of these three for what is a really important piece of work. The government is now considering its recommendations and it will respond to them in the early part of next year. But what has already become very clear is the very difficult state of the Navy which this government has inherited after a lost decade from those opposite. And one fact stands out above all others. Our current fleet of major surface combatants, our destroyers and our frigates, is now the oldest fleet that the Navy has ever operated. And it gets worse. In the final year of the Gillard government, the number of available days from Navy's major combatants, including our submarines, was 3,915. In the last year of the former Liberal government, when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister for Defence, that number had dropped to 2,749, a decline of 30%. Their legacy is the oldest Navy our country has ever operated, with 30% less availability. The Offshore Patrol program, which they initiated, was already running a year late by the time they left office. The Hunter-class program, when they left office, was running 4 years late and billions of dollars over budget. This is the definition of incompetence from the worst national security government that our country has ever seen. But while they were no good at defence policy, they were all over the defence politics, because they had the space and time during the worst bushfires in our country's history to use the Defence Force to cut an ad to raise money for the Liberal Party. Well, Mr Speaker, our government is very different. We are working on a surface fleet for our Navy which will meet the moment of the biggest challenge in strategic circumstances that our country has faced since the end of the Second World War. Those opposite were defence dilettantes. The Albanese Labor government is keeping Australians safe.
Give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. On Sunday, the Deputy Prime Minister declared, quote, "We have committed to implementing the Uluru Statement in full. That's what we have taken to the Australian people, and that's been our articulated position for a long time." Close quotes. Does the Deputy Prime Minister stand by this statement?
Give the call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister.
After a process which really began under the Howard government of seeking to recognise our Indigenous Australians in the Constitution, it was actually the Abbott Liberal government which made the very wise call of saying to this nation that the way in which we should recognise Indigenous Australians in our Constitution is by asking Indigenous Australians how they want that to occur. Now, that is something we agreed with. And as a result of that, we saw hundreds of meetings of Indigenous Australians around this country involving thousands of people, which led to the meeting at Uluru in 2017, which gave rise to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now, at that point, that had been a process which had been bipartisan. Bipartisan in the sense that if you look at those people who held the portfolio for the Liberal Party, they were working on that. Ken Wyatt, no longer a member of the Liberal Party. Julian Leeser, the person appointed by the Leader of the Opposition.
Deputy Prime Minister will pause. The Manager of Opposition, a point of order.
Well, on relevance, Mr Speaker, it was a very specific question. Does the Deputy Prime Minister stand by this statement about implementing the Uluru Statement in full, treaty, truth, Makarrata? Is this government still committed to that? Australian people want to know, and you're refusing to answer.
The Deputy Prime Minister is giving context around the Uluru Statement. I'll just ask him to remind him of the question and to be relevant to the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It led to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And those opposite at that point were working toward the implementation of that. The person who the current Leader of the Opposition appointed as his first spokesman for this issue, Mr Leeser, was an architect of what ended up being placed to the Australian people in the referendum last weekend. And so, yes, our government and the Labor Party, along with the Liberal Party, stood by that process and the Uluru Statement of the Heart. Now, in the light of what has occurred over the course of the weekend, we have made clear that we hear the voice of the Australian people and that the pursuit of reconciliation, the pursuit of closing the gap, is no longer going to be achieved through constitutional reform. But we are completely committed to a process of reconciliation, and we are completely committed to a process of closing the gap, and we are going to take what Indigenous Australians have said in the aftermath of the last weekend, and that is allow time for the dust to settle, and we will work with them about how we can best as a nation achieve the object of closing the gap and pursuing reconciliation in this nation.
The call to the honourable member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Science and Industry. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to prioritise science, and how will last night's Prime Minister's Science Prizes part of this effort?
Call to the Minister for Industry and Science.
Thanks, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Adelaide for that question, because science tackles the toughest problems we face, drives economic growth and helps improve national well-being along the way. Our government committed to a future made in Australia, revitalising manufacturing. And it's important to note that manufacturing invests heavily in R&D. As the Prime Minister puts it, new discoveries making way for new products that will be made right here in this country. It was terrific to celebrate Australian scientific know-how and science teaching last night at the PM's Prizes for Science. Particularly thrilled to see that the PM's Science Prize went to Professor Michelle Simmons, celebrated for her trailblazing work in quantum technologies, Professor Glenn King, whose work with funnel web spiders being translated into new treatments for people following strokes and heart transplants. Professor Chris Greening discovered microbes that live in the air can help us regulate climate change, a world first. Professor Yuri Liu, whose contributions to superfluidity paving the way for a new generation of lower energy-consuming electronic devices, and Associate Professor Lara Herrero, whose experience contracting Ross River virus helped her create the world's first drug with the potential to beat viral arthritis. Now, Speaker, behind every scientist is a science teacher who set them on their path, who nourish their passion and their curiosity about the way the world works. And without brilliant science teachers, we wouldn't have brilliant scientists. And last night we celebrated Ms Judith Stutchbury from Kalki State School, 8 kilometres from the Great Barrier Reef, who is instilling in her primary school students a love of marine science. And we celebrated Ms Donna Buckley from John Curtin College of the Arts in Perth, bringing cryptography and cyber security to the classroom. Along highly commended teachers Matthew Dodds and Dr Gabriel Oslington, these teachers widening the pipeline of STEM talent. You've all been acknowledged earlier, but the House wants you to know how deeply grateful we are of your efforts. Science is absolutely central to unlocking the next generation of opportunities, underpinning our ambitions in advanced manufacturing, agriculture, clean energy, critical technologies. But the key will be investing in skills. That's why the National Skills Agreement is a big deal. I just want to congratulate the Minister for Skills and Training, and particularly pleased to see the commitment of Centres of Excellence, which will bring together universities, industry, the vet sector to help lift skills. This will be key to driving future growth and improving the well-being of the country.
Non-indulgence, the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I just wanted to join with the Minister for Science in congratulating the winners of the Prime Minister's Science Awards. It was a wonderful evening last night with Dr Cathy Foley and the stories that were told, the videos of the winners and what you are achieving in innovation and research, making a difference to people's lives, but also, it must be said, making a difference to our economy as well. There are major commercial benefits by Australia commercialising the opportunities. We've always been very good at science and breakthroughs. What we always haven't done is take advantage of that ourselves. And so to the scientists who were celebrated last night, and I join with Ed, the science teachers were just inspirational. I've been to the Turtle Centre there just near Bagara, and Bundy up in the electorate of Hinkler, and it is a wonderful place. And the Mon Repos Centre there, it's a fantastic facility, a great tourist attraction, talking about protection of our turtles as part of our native wildlife that is so precious here. So can I just congratulate all the winners and congratulate also their families. One of the things that happened last night was people were celebrated who give so much as well, whilst people are doing the research and the time, often without much compensation, it's got to be said, in early years. So congratulations to all. Pete?
And on indulgence, the Manager of Opposition Business.
On indulgence, I want to associate the opposition with the comments of the Prime Minister and the Minister in relation to the Prime Minister's Prize for Science. I was certainly pleased to attend and represent the Leader of the Opposition. It was a very well organised event and appropriately recognising the excellent work of the scientists and teachers who were recognised. I want to particularly acknowledge one of the highly commended science teachers, Dr Gabrielle Ossington, my constituent in Bradfield. I think it's fair to say all of those who received awards were inspirational, and it can be easy to be somewhat discouraged by the range of challenges we may face as a nation or as a world, but when you see what our extraordinary scientists are doing and the solutions they are coming up with on a daily basis, it is cause for hope, for optimism and for faith in the extraordinary capacity of human ingenuity.
The call to the honourable member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. In the May budget, you committed $1 billion to provide low-cost loans for household energy efficiency. I've long called for this to help reduce energy bills. But 5 months after your announcement, we've heard nothing. With bills higher than ever, people in my electorate are really struggling. When will these loans actually be available so my constituents can start saving money?
Give the call to the member for Kennedy will cease interjecting. Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question and her very real interest in this matter, and I do acknowledge that interest of long-standing. She is right. She has been a very constructive interlocutor and a very constructive participant in the public debate. The honourable member is also right. In the budget, we did allocate $1 billion for the Household Energy Savings Program, which was part of a broader $1.7 billion program. And I'm more than happy to give the honourable member a quick update on rolling that out. In relation to the $300 million for social housing, which is very important, that people who live in social housing have a right to investments in energy efficiency, we've already announced the first agreement with the Victorian Government, announced that several weeks ago, and that allocation has been made and is being rolled out. Also, we have another part of the package was the small business tax concessions, which are available today, and I'm sure the honourable member would join with the government in inviting small businesses in her community to ensure that they're making those investments and applying to the tax office for that concession. We also announced the $300 million local government package, which is very important, and that will open for bids shortly. And again, I'm sure the honourable member will let all the local governments in her electorate know that they can apply for that funding. I expect it to be oversubscribed. It will be allocated on a merit base, but that funding will be open certainly this year. In relation to the $1 billion for the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, that money has been allocated, and the Minister for Finance and I have adjusted the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's investment mandate to allow those investments to be made. That was important. The Clean Energy Finance Corporation is now negotiating with banks and financial institutions and other providers of finance. These are done jointly. Just as there are many banks that are already offering green loans, the CEFC will be partnering with those financial institutions to ensure that there are more green loans available right across the country. Up to 110,000 households will benefit. I'm more than happy to advise the honourable member when the Clean Energy Finance Corporation has ceased those negotiations with the banks. Those negotiations are continuing, and I expect further announcements quite soon.
Have you completed your answer? The call to the honourable member for Spence.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government fixing the teacher shortage, and why is that important to supporting a skilled workforce?
The call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the sensational member for Spence for his question. In the years ahead, more jobs are going to require more skills. More jobs will require you to go to TAFE or to university. And that's why
the Minister for Education will pause. The member for New England is continuing to interject through every answer. He'll cease interjecting. He's warned, and if he interjects one more time, he'll leave the chamber. The Minister for Education will be heard in silence.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. As I was saying, more jobs will require you to go to TAFE or to uni. That's why the National Skills Agreement announced today and the extra 300,000 fee-free TAFE places are so important. But before you go to TAFE or to university, you need the sort of skills that only a school teacher can give you, and we don't have enough teachers. That's why in a few weeks' time applications will open for new Commonwealth teacher scholarships, worth up to $40,000 each, designed to encourage more young people to want to be a school teacher. But to get one, you'll also have to give something back. In return for the $40,000 scholarship, you'll have to commit to teach for 4 years. Mr Speaker, we're also improving teacher training. Ask most teachers and they'll tell you when they started they didn't feel ready for the classroom. And that leads to a lot of teachers leaving in the first year or two. That's why education ministers have agreed to reforms to make sure that teaching students are taught the fundamentals at university about how to teach children to read and write and how to manage disruptive classrooms. Ask teachers, and a lot of them will also tell you that they don't feel valued by their community. Recent surveys show that most teachers don't think that what they do is valued by us, and we need to change that. We all remember that special teacher who changed our life, and that's what a national campaign that will kick off in a few weeks is all about. Mr Speaker, I want you to imagine a little boy called Matthias. He's 5 years old, he's in his first year at school at the moment in Queensland, and he's blind. At his school athletics carnival this year, he wanted to run without a cane, just like everyone else. So his teacher takes his hand and he takes off, and all his mates start cheering. Who wouldn't want to be that teacher that made that possible? That teacher is Mrs Cantwell, and she's one of 8 teachers from every state and territory who will feature in this campaign when it kicks off in a few weeks' time. A campaign you'll see online, on bus stops, in shopping centres, on billboards, designed to encourage more Aussies to want to be a teacher. Because the truth is, Mr Speaker, there is no other profession like it. Everything that our teachers do helps our children to aim higher, to be kinder, to work harder, to be braver and to run faster. And because our teachers believe in our kids, they encourage our kids to believe in themselves. And that makes that the most important job in the world.
Call to the honourable member for Groom.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and concerns his failure yesterday and today to stand by his previous commitments to voice, treaty and truth. Last time Labor was in power, its then Prime Minister and mentor to the current Prime Minister described climate change as the greatest moral challenge of our time and then walked away from his commitment. Is this Prime Minister doing the same thing on voice, treaty and truth?
Order. The member for Groom has asked. There's far too much noise. There was a question in there. The Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Groom for his question, which, if I understand it right, he's asking me about actions of the Rudd government in 2009-10, where they opposed action on climate change and were against it. Voted against it not once but twice, any action on climate change, along with sorry to have to raise this, but you know it's coming. You know it's coming, along with the Greens political party, Mr Speaker. I just had to throw that in there. So I get asked about that. That's a matter of history that occurred. Then I get asked, if I get this right, the criticism is that the referendum that we put to the Australian people, that they promised to put to the Australian people at every election from 2007 on, from every leader of the Liberal Party, according to the Leader of the Opposition, said they would advance constitutional recognition, but it didn't happen. They never put it to a referendum. So what we did was put it to a referendum. They opposed it, and now they say, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to get at. But it follows, of course, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition asking a question about the views of Indigenous Australians.
The Prime Minister will pause so I can hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Mr Speaker, on relevance, a very direct question. Is the Prime Minister walking away from his commitment to voice treaty and truth, just as his mentor Kevin Rudd similarly did?
Order.
He cannot answer a simple
Resume
question.
Your seat. The order. Members on my right. Yes, Prime Minister, on the point of order.
Order, Mr Speaker. This was a question that went over decades. Three of them.
Order.
We're now in 2023, and the question went to what occurred in 2009. It was about Indigenous affairs, it was about climate change, it was about Parliament, it was about referendums, it was about constitutional change.
The Prime Minister will pause.
So I don't think it was very direct.
So
that's my point, Mr Speaker.
To be clear, there were a number of moving parts to this question. But order. The Prime Minister has 1 minute 20 seconds remaining. Point of order of relevance has been made. I'm just going to ask the Prime Minister to return to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. So what we've had during this question time, incredibly, is that those opposites sat in their tactics committee and have said, I know what we'll do. We'll ask questions about Kevin Rudd and we'll ask questions about the Indigenous Australians who supported a yes campaign in the referendum, who are disappointed that the referendum didn't get up, having opposed it and having spent months asking questions in here, some of which they knew were quite frankly absurd, about the Reserve Bank and other issues. Now, those opposite are now promising, depending upon whether you watch Sunrise or Today, depending upon whether you tune into Channel 7 or Channel 9, depends on whether they will have a second referendum during the next term. That he says is their policy. But then again, this is the Leader of the Opposition who went into a party room, decided they wanted local, regional and a national voice, and then came out and answered something different. I'm a Prime Minister who sticks to their commitments, says what I will do, and then does it, which is why you don't recognise it.
Order. Order. The Minister for Pacific Island Affairs will cease interjecting. The Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister, will cease interjecting. Order. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Fraser.
My question is to the Minister for Aged Care. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting aged care workers to upskill, to overcome chronic workforce pressures and to lift the standard of aged care in Australia?
Call to the Minister for Aged Care and Sport.
I thank the member for Fraser for his question. I know that he cares deeply about ensuring that we can do everything possible to support aged care workers in the important work that they do looking after our older Australians. And the Albanese government recognises the immense value of aged care workers. They are the beating heart of our aged care sector. And as Australia's population continues to age, we need more of them. We are already growing the aged care workforce, but we know it is critically important to make sure that workers are adequately skilled to make and provide high-quality, safe care. That's why we are supporting aged care workers to upskill and to give them the tools that they need to work in the sectors that we need them to work. And thanks to the Albanese government's Fee-Free TAFE program, 7,869 Australians have now enrolled in a Certificate 3 in individual support to work in either aged care or disability care. And 8,453 Australians have enrolled in the Diploma of Nursing.
Excellent.
And today, the Prime Minister and the Minister for Skills and Training have announced a landmark national skills agreement to unlock billions of dollars for our vocational education and training sector, and I congratulate them both. We have also partnered with the University of Tasmania and the Wicking Dementia Research and Education Centre to deliver free online training modules. And of course, we have invested $5 million in the Maggie Beer Foundation to help train and educate our aged care cooks and chefs. Across the country, Mr Speaker, I've met with providers who see the value in investing in our workers to upskill and pursue a career in aged care. Ningana Aged Care in Dalby has created a relationship with the University of Southern Queensland for workers to attend classes remotely. Excellent. Zion Aged Care in Nunda, in my electorate of Lilly, takes on student nurses from the ACU campus at Banyo. The cumulative effect of these programs is that we are not just growing our aged care workforce, but we are lifting the standard of care being provided to aged care residents. And our September data for 24/7 nursing shows that that coverage continues to increase across the country. Now, 88% of aged care homes have a registered nurse on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And over the past year, Mr Speaker, older people in aged care are now receiving an additional 1.8 million minutes of additional care every single day. That is what can be achieved when you elect a government that has purpose, a government that values workers, and a government that wants to restore dignity to older Australians.
Here.
Call to the honourable member for Griffith.
Question is to the Prime Minister. Your government will give property investors, like yourself, $38 billion in tax concessions this year. But as a result of your decision to lock in unlimited rent increases at National Cabinet, renters will pay an extra $4.9 billion in rent increases. Can you explain to the millions of Australian renters why property investors should get billions, but renters should cop unlimited rent increases every 12 months?
Order. There's far too much noise on my left and right. The Prime Minister has the call.
I joined the Labor Party when I was at school because I could never have afforded to join the Greens. Let me just make that point. Let me just make that point about those opposite there. Those opposite there. I joined a party of working-class people who aspire to a better opportunities and a better life for their children, and that is what we do. We also want to make sure that we have serious housing policy, and the policies put forward by those in the Greens political party are considered by every single state and territory government, every economist, everyone in the property sector, that what they will do is make it harder for renters, not easier. Harder for renters, not easier, which is why we're working on the issue of supply, which is why eventually the Greens saw the light, to your credit, and voted for the Housing Australia Future Fund, having held up a
Order. The
fund.
member for Griffith will cease interjecting.
I take the interjection because he said after we got more money. The big complaint from the Greens party after we announced the Social Housing Accelerator was that they didn't know about it. They didn't know about it was the complaint. Why didn't you tell us about it was what they said. Because what we will do on this side of the House is always take every single opportunity to put more money into public and social housing. That is what we will do. That is what we have done, and that is why we work with states and territories as part of making sure that we get greater supply in housing. And already, can I say, as the Social Housing Accelerator, I've been with the former Premier, Daniel Andrews, who announced a significant program there in Melbourne to help housing supply in Victoria. I then have started the Social Housing Accelerator program in Sydney as well, with the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, when we went to the electorate of Banks to announce a classic example of something that should happen, which is for 3 dilapidated homes that were uninhabitable to be knocked over and to build in its place 11 or 12 purpose-built 1- or 2-bedroom homes which older Australians can have. Now, that will boost housing supply. After the former coalition government in New South Wales left office, there was less public housing than there was when they came into office 12 years earlier. The Labor Party, has, in our DNA, support for housing. We will continue to do so.
Call to the honourable member for Blair.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government working for Australia to make medicines cheaper, and why is the government making Medicare stronger after a decade of attacks on Medicare?
Call to the Minister for Health.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for Blair, part of the magnificent class of 2007, and a relentless advocate for better health and aged care for his electorate, centred on Ipswich, the fastest-growing city in the fastest-growing state of our wonderful Commonwealth. And he promised at the last election a Medicare urgent care clinic in his city of Ipswich, and in August he was able to deliver on that promise, Mr Speaker. A clinic that is open 7 days a week until 10 p.m. in the evening, making it easier to see a doctor and, importantly, taking much-needed pressure off the emergency department at the Ipswich Hotel. And the Ipswich Hospital as well, Mr Speaker. And importantly, Mr Speaker, fully bulk billed. All you need is your Medicare card, every consultation completely free of charge. As I get back on track, Mr Speaker. We also know he's been a passionate advocate of the health and the dignity of older Australians, which is why he is so delighted at our decision from the 1st of November to give 5 million Australians access to the latest cutting-edge vaccine for shingles completely free of charge. Right now, they're paying $560 for that vaccine, but from the 1st of November, they'll have access to the most comprehensive shingles vaccine program in the world, all part of our commitment on cheaper medicines, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the House already knows on the 1st of January we delivered the biggest cut to the price of medicines in the history of the PBS, cutting the cost of general scripts by $12, saving patients right now around $20 million each and every single month, and a world away, Mr Speaker, from the approach of the Leader of the Opposition when he was the Health Minister, because his policy, of course, was to make medicines dearer, not cheaper, trying to hike the cost of general scripts by $5 every time he went to the pharmacy, telling Australians at the time that was the fair thing to do. Well, it hasn't changed, Mr Speaker. He opposed our latest chapter of cheaper medicines to allow 6 million Australians to secure 60 days' supply of common medicines for the cost of a single script, making medicines even cheaper. Allowing better medication compliance, so improving the individual health of patients and freeing up millions and millions of much-needed GP consults, Mr Speaker. Now, his constant opposition won't shake the commitment, I can tell you, of the member for Blair and of all of those on this side of the House to keep on with the job of strengthening Medicare and delivering cheaper medicines.
Call the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given there are no more questions, I ask that questions be placed on the notice paper.